So resolve. Resolve is the 8th parami of the 10 paramis. And in Pali, the word is aditana. Aditana. Adi means further, higher, fuller. And tana means foundation. Fuller, stronger foundation. And this is actually what we're doing. We're strengthening the foundation. How? With resolve, with determination. Resolve is more like the backbone of our practice. It helps us with whatever it is we want to develop. We need to commit to something for it to bear fruit. If we want to play the guitar, we can want all we want, but we have to commit to putting the hours of practice in to develop the physical and mental skills to play it. Right? And the heart also has to stay really interested in order to keep up those skills, maintain those skills. We all know the gap between the cognitive intention to do something and the actual act of doing it, of following through, even when it's hard. This committing to doing is aditana. Here's a quote from Zig Ziglar. He was a promotional speaker. And he said, "It was character that got us out of bed, and commitment that motivated us to action, and the discipline that enabled us to follow through." And this quote actually points to what the parami is emphasizing. It is commitment that moves us to action. In other words, resolve is action. It's active. We are deliberately engaging in doing and saying and thinking something because it's worth our careful attention. If we decide to say, practice generosity, that generosity could use a little more attention, or simply that we feel like generosity is a worthwhile endeavor, well, then we might determine or commit to practicing generosity. This doesn't mean that we won't at times forget to be generous, that we won't be selfish or careless ever again. It means, though, that we're going to actively keep recalling, keep bringing attention back to this quality, that we will keep reminding ourselves that we are practicing being generous, and that we're trying to move that forward in our lives. So resolve is not a club that we beat ourselves with. It's a Post-it note that is just strategically placed to remind us to remember to be generous when we might otherwise be stingy, withholding, or unaware, just unaware, unmindful. This is a critical point, that resolve is not a club that we beat ourselves with. It is a Post-it note to help us remember. Resolve is not about overstriving. It is firming up and clarifying our natural intention to move toward the wholesome and away from the unwholesome, to move toward less suffering and more ease of well-being. Resolve, in light of the Buddhist teachings, is always about moving in this general direction toward less suffering and more ease of well-being. What is interesting about resolve is that it can be applied to anything, with the same result of strengthening or fortifying whatever we deliberately put caring attention on. So when aditana is combined with the other paramis, we can see how it serves to strengthen them. When we decide that we're going to take up the practice of generosity, then we determine or commit to practicing generosity. When we decide to practice sila, to practice non-harm and goodwill, well, then we put sila forward in our mind. We recollect it many times and actively determine, commit, or recommit to practicing refraining from causing harm. Recommitting is a big part of the practice because we forget many times. Each time, though, each time we recommit, we strengthen our resolve. Each time we recommit, we also strengthen not only the firmness of our commitment, but also we're strengthening the quality that we are applying it to. So, can you see the impact of this parami? It says that what we deliberately and actively bring forward in our minds will grow. Put forward useful qualities, wholesome, healthy qualities, and they will grow. Keep noticing the detours, and at some point, you'll find the quickest way back onto the main road. Keep noticing where you're falling asleep at the wheel, and at some point, you'll remain awake. We're trying to remember something too important to forget. Resolve says, let's practice not forgetting. Let's practice actively remembering. So, what do you need to remember a particular intention or quality of heart-mind? What do you need? As some of you know, Bill and I did a 4-year retreat. And when we returned to our life in Boston, I realized how the house had been arranged no longer seemed right. Its former iteration didn't fit with who I was any longer. For example, prior to the retreat, our meditation practice was on the 3rd floor. It was this lovely, cozy little room that was very special, very quiet, and tucked away from a lot of the distractions and noise everywhere else, outside and in the house. And for many years, going upstairs to the 3rd floor felt right. But now, when I came back from that 4-year retreat, it didn't. It didn't. Practice had become central to my life. It was a centerpiece. And the meditation room also needed to reflect that centrality. So it was moved to the 1st floor, resurrected on the 1st floor, right here. I have to walk by it every day, many times a day. But this reflected and reinforced my resolve, my commitment to practice, right? With resolve, there is a clear turning toward, a putting a stake in the ground, making a commitment, not out of coercion, not because others think it's a good idea, but because we see for ourselves the usefulness of doing something. At first, intentions are often heady, they're cognitive, they're intellectual. It's a good idea to do X, Y, or Z. But until we commit, until we put a stake in the ground and actively begin to do something, it's only wishful thinking. Intentions don't hold us until we put our back into it, until we put our time and our energy into what seems important to us. So in particular this week, I'd like to suggest that we resolve to bring more mindfulness into our daily life, that we put a stake in the ground and deliberately bring mindfulness to the fore. This means remembering to remember to bring mindfulness to mind. That is our definition, my definition of sati. Remembering to remember to bring mindfulness to mind. To deliberately notice when Susan is on the scene. To deliberately notice when we are in autopilot. To deliberately notice and then shift out of that mode and into a posture of caring attention, as if a dear friend, as if a wise elder was standing with us and watching over our well-being, watching over what we were doing and how we were doing it. How can we firm up our commitment to inhabit that posture of mindfulness without getting pushy? Without getting pushy. What will help us do that? What will help us remember this posture of caring attention? Might a strategically placed Post-it note that says something like kind eyes, that says something like who is doing or speaking right now? And how is that doing and speaking being done? With what attitude is it being done? Right? What little prompts will help you remember, will sort of wake us up out of our habit, out of our autopilot, and into, oh, the present moment. And I can care about whatever it is I'm doing once I wake up. I then have a choice to care about what I'm doing when I wake up. This practice of mindfulness is not just about sitting on the cushion. It's about adopting, about inhabiting a very different way of relating to ourselves, to others, and the world that is based on non-harm and goodwill, that leads to less suffering and more ease of well-being. So let's practice bringing this equanimous, caring attention to the fore and see what happens. We can do it. It's for our welfare. And we can do it with a kind, firm hand, lovingly. All right? Thank you for your kind attention.